Hi everyone and welcome to another video from Hostile Territory. In this video, we're going to be talking about problems with aggressive bosses. In my previous video, I told you some tips that I recommend for dealing with aggressive bosses and how to get this problem out of your way. In this video, I'll be talking about my personal experiences and where I got those tips from. So hopefully you'll get something from this story, something that can help you. Stay tuned.
Hostile territory.
Now, the first situation with one of my bosses is yelling and calling me bad names. Now, the situation was, this happened in my previous company with my first boss in the previous company, is that one day there was a situation where we couldn't simply work. There was a sort of financial mechanism where if your client doesn't pay certain fees, that mechanism gets blocked and you can't work. And what happens, you come to work and essentially everything is frozen. You can't do cases, you can't contact with clients, you can't do any kind of shipment or everything else, and it's a big problem. And this is to be avoided at all costs. But as things happen, my colleague didn't tell me, or perhaps I didn't tell him or her, I can't remember. Anyway, the problem slipped through. And lo and behold, we came to work and we couldn't essentially do anything. The first thing that happened is we in the branch office had to tell our boss what happened. Now, my coworkers at that time, including my future boss, didn't have the guts to call the boss and to tell him what happened. And this is not advertising myself, but this is what happened. I told him I'm gonna call him. We have to solve this problem. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. We don't have anything to work with. If we don't solve it, then we're finished for that day. We're gonna have lots of problems. Maybe get fired even. And I called the boss. He lives in another city where the other branch office is. He was at work over there, and I picked up the phone, called him, told him what happened, and all hell broke loose. Are you normal? Do you know what's gonna happen? Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. And I said, yeah, I understand. What are we gonna do? And at that moment, he calls me a horse's ASS. And I know this guy for only 3 or 4 months. And he calls me that, then he calls me something else, then something else. And after that, I just told him on the phone, what are you talking about, man? And he said, but do you know what's gonna happen about what's gonna happen at work or something else? And I told him, I don't care about the effing work. What'd you call me? What are you saying? And at that moment, the conversation stopped, and I hear him breathing in the phone. And he says something like, do you know the consequences of what happened? And I told him, I couldn't give a rat's ass about the consequences. I really don't care. Why'd you call me those names? Who do you think you are? And at that moment, he stopped and he switched the whole conversation to, come on, don't be that way. I think we'll solve some blah, 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 blah. And this is something that may be useful for you. Instead of me weeping on the phone, telling, oh, boss, I'm so sorry. Oh, you're the master of the universe. Help us and everything else. By doing that, I actually solved the problem. And lo and behold, at 10 or 11 o'clock a.m., the whole problem was solved. That's one situation. The other situation was when that same boss came to the branch office and yelled at me. We had lots of work. There was a ton of work and everything else, but if you organize it well, there's no problem. Anyway, I made the whole preparation of what we were supposed to do, and the only thing we needed that boss for is for him to come and sort of oversee that everything is okay, nothing else. There was no need for him regarding work to have any kind of involvement. But I think this guy had some sort of issue, psychological issue, where all of a sudden, everything is working fine, everything is okay. All of a sudden he started to yell, he started to cuss, he started to say bad words, he started to talk to people in a way he shouldn't, and so on. And this is what happened. I was doing this, I'm gonna call it a case. I was doing this case, I was typing on my computer. Everything is tense, everybody's doing their work. Everybody has to do that work in collaboration with each other, so it's done in a right manner. My boss comes to my computer and starts shouting and yelling, what's the meaning of this? What the hell are you doing? What do you think you're doing? Do you think you're gonna make a mistake? And I was shocked. What the hell is this guy talking about? And I looked at my papers, I looked at the computer. What was wrong? What's the problem? And the problem was he was watching certain things that he didn't understand that were done right on my side, but he saw them as me doing them wrong. And I guess from that shock and from everything else and from simply being annoyed from that kind of behavior, I slapped my hands on the table, rose up and asked him, what's wrong? What kind of behavior is that? And all of the people around that were there sort of turned around, with eyes this big and sort of looked at what's going to happen. And trust me, at that moment when I saw that person who was, very infuriating, big red face and everything else, he was going overboard. Anyway, when I stood up to him and asked him what kind of behavior is that, only it was a more heavier tone, and asked him, what's the problem? And why are you yelling, Why are you behaving that way? Just leave us to do the work and everything else. And at that moment, that person, just like with the situation on the phone, he saw that I can't say he met his match, but he simply saw that there was someone who wasn't afraid of him. And just like with the phone, that person flipped the situation and said, I'm gonna go out and have a cigarette. And he went out and he came back and it was like nothing happened. From that moment onwards, I never had that kind of situation with that person. Unlike my other colleagues, they had all kinds of situations with him, starting from yelling, from shouting, from calling bad names and everything else, but they just tolerated it and put up with it. I wouldn't. Now, not long after those situations, my previous boss in that company got fired because he did certain things that were sort of bad, and he got fired from the company. And the next thing that happened is that my coworker, who was the most experienced in that line of work, began to be the boss in the branch office, replacing the previous guy. And at the first couple of months, everything was okay and everything else, only for that person to start in some way acting the same as my previous boss. I guess he saw what were the thin spots of the management within the head office and he tried to use them in the same way. Only he wasn't so aggressive in that manner, but he was to become later. Now, I've talked about this person in my previous videos. This boss had a serious alcoholic problem. The woman who was working in the branch office, him and her had an affair. They were very serious lovers. They had no problem in showing everybody in the branch office that they were lovers and so on. I made a specific video about this. I'll leave a link in the description and you can see what kind of things people are ready to do in the workplace. It's preposterous. When he became the boss, the first couple of months were okay until he adapted a bit. When he saw where he could do certain things, things started to change regarding me. Because, regarding all of the other people working in the branch office, one was his mistress, the other guy was the mistress's and his best friend, and the fourth guy was his best friend from town, from the bar, from whatever, I don't know. Anyway, he started sort of channeling that aggressiveness towards me. The first situation was when this person was drinking at the workplace. He had something like almost half a liter of hard liquor in the morning and continued in the afternoon with like 7, 8, 9, 10 beers. I don't know how much. Of course, this causes aggressiveness. And through that aggression, because of work, because of I think certain problems in his private life, he started yelling in the branch office. He started cursing, cussing, everything else, and he started essentially making my workplace also a bad place to be. And in that moment, I stood up from my desk and simply asked him, are you going to stop acting like that? What's the problem? And again, this person I think he was on the brink of either slapping me or putting a fist in my face. He was very, very mad. And he said, what do you care? Just leave me be and that's it. And that was the end of that situation. The other situation was one time in the same shift, I was working with my boss and the boss's mistress. And at that time, it was sort of a tense situation for me in that branch office. What they really wanted is to get me out of the company. They got the knowledge and now they just wanted me out of there. So I guess that was the reason why this happened, what I'm going to tell you. One day, the three of us were in the office, and out of nowhere, they start picking on me, just like in the schoolyard. I was sitting at my desk doing my job and everything else, and they, start acting like bullies, telling me certain things. I'm not going to go into details and everything else, where they gave me sort of this notion that they are the head honchos, that they are the main people within the branch office. They were older than me, and all that crap. One thing led to another, and then the boss, because his mistress was there and he wanted to start being sort of a wise guy in front of her, he started insulting me, and he started telling me things like I was some sort of servant or something like that. And I just snapped. I turned around and I essentially, just like with the previous boss, I told him, what's the matter? What are you talking about? Who do you think you are? What kind of insults are those? Do you think that because this woman is here, you can talk like that? And it just came pouring out of me because I was fed up to here. And I was disappointed because all of the situation was going that way. I was working in a great company, but I was working with people who wanted to push me out because I was a good person towards them. And next, what happened is that I essentially insulted him in front of his mistress, which was a mistake. If I wanted to manipulate the situation, I should have reacted differently. But I did this. And what this guy did is he stood up, then I stood up, and what I expected is a fist fight. I don't know what's gonna come next, but nothing happened. This guy just rose and said, "You're gonna see, you're gonna see what's gonna happen." And I told him I really don't care because you're essentially nothing in this company. And that was, I think, the first major clash with my boss. The alcoholic stuff came later. And after that, it was never good. The relations were never good from the start, because this guy didn't like me. He was a serious narcissist and a guy who always wanted to be a boss. But, in some segments, I was better than he was, and he had problems with that. And those were the kinds of situations that were present almost all the time. He tried to always prove to me who he was, that he was an authority, that I should listen to him. And I had no problems doing that whatsoever. But you're an alcoholic, you have an affair at work, you don't know how to organize work. I taught you most of the things for the work that you took credit for, so who are you to be respected? The point of this video is to show you one thing. When I stood up to those aggressive people, that aggression went down because they saw that first, I wasn't afraid. Second, there's gonna be hell to pay if you start insulting me, abusing me in any way. That's where the job finishes, and I really don't care if I get fired or reprimanded in any way. You're gonna get what is coming to you, and there's no stopping that. I don't really want to come off as some sort of tough guy, something like that. I'm the exact opposite. But the truth is, when you oppose aggressive people in that way, they are essentially cowards. They mean nothing. They have no backbone whatsoever, and they simply change the record to side B, and they have a different stance towards you. Not only at that time, but in future times also. I must tell you one more thing. With both of my bosses, and with one more boss before that, in a different company, when you oppose these people, and when you show them that you are not afraid of them and that you do not respect them whatsoever, they will stay away from you like from wildfire. When they have some dealings with you regarding work and everything else, they will treat you in a certain way and approach you with dignity. And at least they will not yell at you and treat you like garbage. But if you let them do that, they will stomp all over your face. They will tell you certain things. They will make an example of you in front of other people and so on. Again, as I mentioned in my previous video, it is much like in the schoolyard. If you let the bully kick your face and you don't respond to it, even if you're the weaker one, then you can expect the same thing tomorrow. So, dear viewer, I think I spent all the oxygen in this room talking about this. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. Again, all the videos that I make have one explicit purpose, and that is to help you in your toxic workplace, to tell you that it's not the end of the world, that you'll find yourself a better job for sure, that you'll get out of there. And the best way to do that is to, sort of use these tips to save your health. That is the most important thing, and to get out of that place as intact as possible. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe. It's a huge help for what we're doing, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.